Anna Miller was 32 years old and knew how to walk silently through the hallways of the rich. A housekeeper since she was 15, she carried on her shoulders a quiet courage, a sense of justice that burned low in her chest, an attention to detail that no one else noticed, and a faith she practiced every day in small gestures. A worn-out rosary in her apron pocket, a candle lit before leaving her home in the Bronx, a prayer murmured on the packed early morning bus. What almost no one saw was the conflict that lived inside her like a cornered animal, a long-held fear of not being heard, born from a complaint that was ignored when she was 20, and a deep-seated reluctance to directly confront people with power and family names. In the Greenwich, Connecticut mansion where she worked 3 times a week, the victim was clear to anyone who bothered to look closely. Mr. Ernest Roth, 80 years old, father of the famous millionaire developer Julian Roth. For weeks, the old man had been throwing up everything he ate, with no convincing explanation, from the private doctors who showed up occasionally with their leather briefcases and hurried glances. To Anna, he wasn't just the old boss. Mr. Roth reminded her of her own grandfather, whom she hadn't been able to care for properly when he fell ill years ago while she was working 2 jobs to help her mother. That resemblance, the way he held his cup with both hands, the shy smile of someone who feels like a burden, awakened in her a silent, almost painful loyalty. Her goals were both simple and enormous: to protect Mr. Roth's health, to prevent something worse from happening to him, and along with that to understand what was really going on. With his food, with the medications the private nurse left organized on the nightstand with handwritten labels. But she ran up against 2 obstacles that felt like concrete walls. The first was practical. She was just the cleaning lady, with no access to medical decisions, no right to ask too many questions, no permission to touch the documents the nurse kept in a locked folder. The second was emotional. The terror of being treated once again as dramatic, ignorant, a meddler, if she dared to open her mouth, while carefully sorting the trash bags in the huge white-tiled kitchen, a habit, from home, where she saved every recyclable to help a neighbor who collected cans. She jotted down times and details in a small blue notebook, the kind sold for a couple of bucks at the corner store. It was purely an organizational habit, a quirk she'd developed over the years to remember what each employer preferred, which day to change the sheets, when to water the plants. No one imagined that this notebook, the caregiver's routines, the rosary in her pocket, and her trips to the gated community's dumpster would later become her only tools of defense. That Thursday afternoon, the sun streamed through the living room window with a golden light that illuminated the dust floating in the air. Anna finished mopping the polished hardwood floor, put the mop and bucket away in the utility closet that smelled of disinfectant and artificial lavender. She went up the service stairs, narrow steps, a cold iron handrail, to say goodbye to Mr. Roth, as she always did before leaving. He was sitting in the worn leather armchair near his bedroom window, looking down at the garden where a landscaper was pruning the rose bushes with mechanical movements. The old man looked up when she came in. There was a sickly pallor to his face, a thinness that hadn't been there months ago. He smiled with effort. "Leaving already, dear?" "Yes, Mr. Roth. I'll be back early tomorrow. Do you need anything before I go?" He shook his head slowly. No. You've already done more than enough. Thank you, you hear?" Anna felt her chest tighten. There was gratitude in his voice, but also a resigned sadness, as if he knew something was wrong, but didn't have the strength to fight. She clutched the strap of her faded canvas bag and, without thinking, reached out and lightly touched his shoulder over his flannel robe. "God is watching over you, you know. You can be sure of that." Mr. Roth held her hand for a moment, his fingers trembling and cold. He didn't say anything, but his grateful look spoke more than any words. Anna left the room with a lump in her throat, her heart beating faster. She went down the service stairs, crossed the empty kitchen — Mary, the cook, had already left — passed through the laundry room that smelled of detergent and fabric softener, and went out the side door that led to the service area. At the community gate, she greeted Rose, the attendant, a woman with grey hair pulled into a tight bun who spent her days sewing behind the glass of the gatehouse. Rose knew every employee, every resident, every movement in that place, Anna liked her because she never treated her with that polite disdain that so many others had. "See you tomorrow, Rose. Godspeed, honey. And watch yourself at the bus stop. It's getting dangerous at night." Anna nodded and walked along the tree-lined sidewalk, past silent mansions protected by high walls and security, cameras. The contrast with her own neighborhood was jarring. Back in the Bronx, the streets were narrow, the houses packed tightly together, the air filled with the constant noise of music, children playing, street vendors shouting about bread, propane tanks, brooms. Here the silence was almost artificial, broken only by the low rumble of a passing luxury car. While waiting at the empty bus stop, she took the blue notebook from her bag and flipped through the pages, filled with small, neat handwriting. Times. Names of medications copied from the bottles she saw on the nightstand. Notes about the strange smell that lingered in the bathroom after the private nurse left. Details that seemed insignificant, but together formed a disturbing picture. She put the notebook away when the bus arrived, crowded and loud. She got on, paid her fare, and stood in the aisle, holding the metal handrail to keep from falling during the sudden stops. She closed her eyes for a moment and, with her free hand, touched the rosary in her pocket. She whispered softly, just to herself, a brief and urgent prayer, that God would give her clear eyes to see the truth and a brave mouth, to speak at the right time, even if it cost her everything. The bus continued along the illuminated highway, carrying tired workers back home. Anna opened her eyes and looked out the window at the city lights spreading out like an uneven carpet, thinking of Mr. Roth alone in that large, silent room, and of everything she still needed to uncover before it was too late. In the following days, Anna moved through the mansion as always, mop in hand, bucket of water and disinfectant, yellow rubber gloves up to her elbows. But now every sound and every smell became a sign, a piece of a puzzle she was assembling alone in silence. She began to notice a disturbing pattern. Whenever the private nurse Paul came out of Mr. Roth's bathroom, the smell of hospital-grade disinfectant mixed with another odor, more acidic, more aggressive, that didn't belong to any cleaning product she knew. And every time the old man ate the soup prepared with such care, half an hour later came the dry, painful sound of vomiting, followed by the nurse's irritated murmur and Mary's quiet complaints in the kitchen. The house was filled with the noise of status, as Anna thought of it. Julian's cell phone rang non-stop with calls from banks, lawyers, journalists. His wife Camilla spoke loudly on the phone about charity galas, social events, dinners at expensive restaurants. The TVs scattered throughout the house showed news programs where the developer appeared as a model of success. A man who had built an empire in the construction industry, admired and envied. In stark contrast, Anna's work was a diligent silence, sweeping the marble floors, dusting the mahogany furniture, tying up black trash bags and taking them to the metal dumpster at the back of the property where they stayed until the city collection. This contrast hurt her inside like a shard of glass lodged in her chest. She felt that Mr. Roth's life was being swallowed by all that noise, that no one was looking down at the old man's quiet suffering. With the patience of someone weaving an embroidery stitch by stitch, she began to build a chain of cause and effect. She noticed that the vomiting was more intense, more violent, when the food tray was prepared personally by Paul, a thin man in his 40s, always in a pristine white coat with a professional smile that never reached his eyes. But when Mary, defying orders, insisted that Mr. Roth try some fresh-cut fruit, papaya with honey, or chilled watermelon, the symptoms seemed milder, less severe. Anna started noting these patterns in her blue notebook in her small handwriting, along with full names, exact meal times, and even the brand of the medications she could glimpse on the nightstand when she went to change the sheets. Between mopping sessions, she discreetly forged ties with two people who would become her unwitting allies. The first was Rose, the gatehouse attendant, a woman who knew everyone's movements in the community with frightening precision. She spent her days in the cramped gatehouse that smelled of reheated coffee and mothballs, sewing, observing, overhearing snippets of conversations. The second was Miguel, the young delivery guy from the local pharmacy, a skinny guy in his early 20s who had been delivering prescriptions to that mansion for years and knew when something in the pattern of orders changed. It was Rose who first gave her a crucial piece of information one Friday afternoon as Anna was leaving work. "You know, Anna, I've been finding it strange," the attendant said, without looking up from her sewing. "Lately, the medicine orders for Mr. Roth have doubled. It used to be 1 package a week, now it's 2, 3. And it's always that annoying nurse picking them up, never Julian." Anna's heart sped up, but she kept her face neutral. "Really? That's weird." "It is. And get this, last week they even returned a bottle. Miguel was saying it came with the son's name on it, not the father's. They swapped it and sent it back." This information fit into the notebook's entries like pieces of a mosaic. Anna started paying more attention to conversations, gestures, details that had previously seemed insignificant, and that's how the first antagonists began to take sharp focus before her. Paul, the nurse, always with that cold, professional smile, talked too much about well-organized inheritances when he was on the phone on the veranda thinking no one was listening. Camilla, the daughter-in-law, treated Anna with a polite contempt, the kind of subtle cruelty that leaves no visible mark but corrodes you from the inside. At Sunday lunches, when the whole family gathered, Camilla would ask in a soft, concerned voice if Mr. Roth had signed all the necessary papers. Yet if the will was all in order, if it wouldn't be better to consider a specialized senior living facility where he would have professional care. Details that Anna underlined in her notebook, not yet knowing how they would fit into the complete picture. It was in the midst of this silent observation that she faced her first direct obstacles. The first was social, a blow to her dignity that still stung days later. Camilla humiliated her in front of other household staff, the gardener, the woman who did the ironing, for asking an innocent question about a prescription that was on the kitchen table. "Anna, dear," Camilla said in that sweet, venomous tone, "you're here to clean, not to meddle in things you don't understand. My father-in-law's medical issues are handled by qualified professionals, not by, well, people like you." Anna lowered her head, her cheeks burning with shame, and went back to the service area without a word. But the phrase stuck in her like a thorn. People like you. That night, on the bus ride home, she cried silently, looking out the window, feeling the weight of humiliation and helplessness. The second obstacle was material and more concrete. Paul changed the lock on the medicine cabinet in Mr. Roth's room, installing a small but sturdy padlock. Now Anna could no longer see the bottles, the labels, the names of the medications. This frustrated her deeply, but it also ignited a stubborn determination within her. Her first small victory came through Mary, the cook, a short, soft-spoken black woman in her 50s who had worked at the house for over 10 years. Anna noticed that Mary was also uneasy about Mr. Roth's situation, but was afraid to speak up, afraid of losing the job that supported her 3 children and 2 grandchildren. One afternoon, when they were alone in the kitchen, Anna proposed something in a low voice while drying dishes. "Mary, could you save a little bit of Mr. Roth's food before you take it to him? Just a little in a separate container." Mary looked at her with wide, frightened eyes. "Save it? What for?" "Just to be sure. In case we need to show it to someone." There was a heavy silence. Mary wiped her hands on her apron, thoughtful. "You really think something's wrong, don't you?" Anna nodded slowly. "I do. I don't know what, but I do." Mary took a deep breath and nodded in agreement. From then on, she began to discreetly save small portions of the food in glass jars, hidden at the back of the refrigerator behind other containers. This silent pact cost them both. Anna had to stay late several afternoons without extra pay, just to be around and help cover for Mary's presence in the kitchen when Paul was lurking. She would go home with an aching back and swollen feet, but with the feeling that she was doing what needed to be done. Meanwhile, the subplots continued to intertwine with the main storyline. Miguel, the delivery guy, started paying closer attention to the orders. One afternoon, while dropping off a package, he commented quietly to Anna, who was sweeping the entrance. "You know, they're ordering a lot of strong sedatives. That's usually for terminal patients, you know. People in a lot of pain. But Mr. Roth doesn't look terminal to me. He's sick, but not like that." Anna acknowledged the information with a discreet nod and wrote everything down as soon as she got home, sitting at the small kitchen table she shared with her grandmother and younger brother. Every detail mattered. Every overheard conversation, every strange smell, every coincidence of timing was recorded in neat handwriting in the blue notebook that, unbeknownst to her, was becoming the only concrete evidence she would have in the future. That night, before sleeping, Anna knelt beside her narrow bed and prayed with the rosary in her fingers, asking for strength, for courage, asking that God help her protect this old man whom no one else seemed to truly see. And as much as fear paralyzed her, as much as doubt gnawed at her, something stronger began to grow in her chest, the certainty that she couldn't just look away and pretend nothing was happening. As the days went by, the presence of the true adversaries became clearer, like when a fog lifts to reveal the full landscape. Julian, the millionaire developer, wasn't a soap opera villain, the kind who laughs maniacally and twirls an imaginary mustache. He was a tired man in his 40s, obsessed with the business that consumed his nights and weekends, convinced that keeping his father at home, under control and supervision, was for the best. His motivation was rooted in the public image he had so carefully cultivated: the devoted son, the responsible businessman, the family man who would never abandon his elderly father. He didn't want to see malice under his own roof. To him, everything was just natural complications of old age, the wear and tear of time, inevitable frailty. His moral boundary was a thin, comfortable line. He didn't confront suffering directly, delegating everything to well-paid professionals and closing his eyes to what he didn't want to see. Paul, on the other hand, was a functional accomplice with motives as clear as dirty water. Anna had discovered, almost by accident, a forgotten invoice on top of the kitchen microwave. On it, scribbled in blue pen in a hurried script, was a bank account number and a note. Extra deposit, month 3. The nurse was receiving discreet payments, money that didn't come from the family's official payroll. This explained his exaggerated care in guarding documents, the way he monitored who entered and left Mr. Roth's room, the controlling manner in which he administered every pill, every meal. Camilla, the daughter-in-law, was perhaps the most dangerous because she operated in the shadows of elegance and performative concern. She pushed the situation forward with gentle insinuations, planted in Sunday lunch conversations, while she cut her meat with surgical precision. She spoke of luxury senior residences with gardens, 24-hour nurses, recreational activities. She spoke of simplified wills, of avoiding future fights among heirs, of not prolonging the inevitable. For her, the moral boundary was diffuse and malleable. As long as everything seemed legal, elegant, socially acceptable, her conscience was clear. No one was killing anyone with their own hands, after all. These were just administrative, medical, rational decisions. Anna Miller observed all of this while she cleaned, mopped, changed sheets, and emptied trash cans. And it was precisely in the trash that she found the first major breakthrough, the one that would turn vague suspicion into concrete certainty. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, with the constant sound of water hitting the window panes and running down the gutters. Julian had traveled to Washington, D.C., Camilla was at a spa in the Hamptons, and the house breathed an unusual silence, broken only by the clinking of dishes in the kitchen and the sound of the television in Mr. Roth's room. Anna took advantage of the calm to do something she had been planning for days, to carefully search the trash bags before taking them to the dumpster. She put on her rubber gloves, tied her apron, and opened the first black bag on newspaper spread across the laundry room floor. The smell was strong, unpleasant, a mix of soured food and chemicals. Among dirty napkins and yogurt containers, her fingers found something strange: opened, empty capsules, mixed with remnants of dark, congealed soup. She carefully set them aside, placing them in a clear plastic bag. She kept searching and found a small glass vial with the label crudely torn off, still with yellowish drops at the bottom. She brought it to her nose and the smell made her recoil, her eyes burning. In that instant, she remembered a conversation she had overheard days before. Miguel, the delivery guy, had mentioned a powerful drug used for terminal patients with uncontrollable pain, always administered in strictly controlled doses because any excess could cause severe nausea, vomiting, and mental confusion. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with an almost audible sound. Someone was tampering with Mr. Roth's food. It wasn't negligence, it wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, systematic, planned. The certainty hit her like a punch to the gut. She sat on the cold laundry room floor, still holding the vial, and felt her legs go weak. She went to the service bathroom, locked the door, and allowed the tears to come silently, biting her hand to keep from making a sound. The weight of the past fell on her with brutal force. Years ago, her mother had died after medical malpractice at a public hospital. Anna, then 20, had tried to report it, had sought out authorities, gathered papers, but no one took her seriously. She was too young, too poor, too scared. The complaint was dismissed as unfounded, and the guilt of that failure had haunted her ever since. Now, sitting in that tiny bathroom that smelled of bleach, the same fear paralyzed her. What if no one believed her again? What if they treated her like she was crazy, dramatic, a meddler? What if she lost her job, her reference, the chance to support her grandmother and brother? The easiest thing would be to throw it all away, pretend she saw nothing, keep cleaning and shut her mouth. It would be safer, simpler. But then the image of Mr. Roth returned with force. His hand trembling as he held his teacup, the grateful smile when she fluffed his pillows, the way he called her dear with genuine affection. She remembered the grandfather she couldn't protect, the mother she couldn't save, and something stronger than fear rose up inside her, the refusal to stay silent again, to leave another wronged person alone. She washed her face with cold water, dried it with a paper towel, tucked the vial and capsules into the bottom of her purse, and went back to work with her heart pounding. Her internal conflict was sharper than ever. The desire for justice fought hand-to-hand against the terror of facing a system that had already crushed her once before. Meanwhile, the subplots continued to intertwine in unexpected ways. Rose, the gatehouse attendant, mentioned to Anna one Thursday morning that she had accidentally overheard a family lawyer talking on the phone in the gatehouse. He was talking about updating a will, about urgent changes that needed to be made before things get complicated. Miguel, for his part, brought another disturbing piece of information. A specific sedative, normally used in minimal doses for terminal patients in hospices, was being purchased with unusual frequency. And the name on the prescription wasn't Mr. Roth's, it was Camilla's. Anna noted everything in the blue notebook, which she now carried in her purse at all times, afraid to leave it anywhere in the house. Each page filled with fragile, circumstantial evidence that meant nothing on its own, but together painted a terrifying picture. For every goal she had, protect Mr. Roth, find solid proof, make someone listen, 2 new obstacles appeared. Her adversaries began to suspect her, to watch her movements. Paul started locking the bedroom when he left, even if it was just to get water. Camilla cut Anna's hours, citing budget cuts. And there were her own limitations, the paralyzing fear of losing her job, the urgent need for her salary to pay the overdue rent, to buy her grandmother's medicine, to keep her brother in school. Any apparent coincidence had a logical explanation. Anna was always there because it was her job to be there. She always cleaned at the same times because she had a fixed routine. She overheard conversations because her employers spoke without caring about the presence of the staff, treating them like invisible furniture. Nothing was magic or a lucky break. Everything stemmed from the silent consistency of her work, her meticulous attention to detail, the habit of being present without being noticed. That night, after returning home on the crowded, noisy bus, Anna sat at her kitchen table with the notebook open and reread everything she had written. The evidence was fragile, the suspicions were grave, the fear was real. But the decision was made, even if she didn't know exactly what to do with it yet. She picked up her worn rosary, ran her fingers over the faded beads, and whispered a prayer that was more of a plea than a certainty, that God would give her the strength to move forward, show her the way and protect Mr. Roth until she could find a way to get him out of danger. She didn't ask for miracles or easy solutions. She just asked for the courage to do what was right, even if it cost her everything. And that night, for the first time in a long time, she fell asleep with the strange feeling that she had a purpose greater than just surviving the next day. The story took a different turn on a Friday night when Camilla organized an elegant dinner at a restaurant in the Hamptons, and Julian had to travel to Chicago for an important bid. Their simultaneous absence left the Greenwich mansion in a deceptive, almost artificial calm. Only Anna, Paul, Mary, and the night guard, Walter, a thin man who spent his nights watching football on a small TV inside the gatehouse, remained. For the adversaries, it was the perfect moment to act without prying eyes around. For Anna, it was the only real opportunity to confirm everything she had been suspecting. Armed only with what was already part of her life, the blue notebook tucked in her purse, the rosary in her apron pocket, the shy trust Mary had in her and her precise knowledge of everyone's schedules, she made a decision that both terrified and relieved her. She was going to risk everything. The night arrived with a heavy silence. Mary left at 8, as always, leaving Mr. Roth's dinner ready and covered with aluminum foil in the refrigerator. Anna pretended she was also leaving, said goodbye to the guard, walked to the gate, but then circled around the back of the building and re-entered through the service entrance using the key she had for the back gate. Her heart was beating so hard it seemed to echo off the white walls of the empty hallway. She went up the service stairs slowly, stepping on the edges of the steps to avoid making noise. She knew Paul had a habit of going down to the garage around 9 to pick up packages that arrived via overnight delivery. She had seen this pattern repeat for weeks. She waited, hidden in the dark hallway, listening to the ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room, until she heard the nurse's footsteps descending the main staircase and the sound of the elevator. When silence returned, Anna entered Mr. Roth's room with trembling hands. The old man was asleep in the large bed, his breathing irregular, looking far too thin under the linen sheet. The light from the lamp on the nightstand cast shadows on the high ceiling. She tiptoed across the room, passed through the marble bathroom that smelled of expensive soap and disinfectant, and stopped in front of the medicine cabinet, secured with a padlock. That's when her memory for detail saved everything. Weeks earlier, while cleaning the bathroom window, Anna had noticed that the wooden frame had a small defect, a crack in the lower part where the paint was peeling. She had made a mental note to tell the property manager but never got around to it. Now, looking closely, she realized that this defect made the frame loose. It wasn't magic. It wasn't luck. It was an attention to detail accumulated over months of silent work. She gently pushed on that weak spot, feeling the wood give millimeter by millimeter. She managed to slide her hand inside, reach the inner window latch and open it just enough to get her arm through and, unlock the cabinet from the inside, where the padlock only secured the exterior. The second major breakthrough was right there, stored among white plastic bottles and medicine boxes. Anna picked up one of the bottles with shaky hands. The label had Mr. Roth's name, but the handwriting was different from the prescription she had seen weeks before in the kitchen, which Mary had saved. Inside were pills that didn't match the description on the packaging. She photographed everything with her old cell phone, the camera shaking, the light dim, but managing to capture enough. The name on the label, the different pills, the lot number. In the bathroom trash can, she found another empty capsule with bits of still fresh soup stuck to the edge. She photographed that too. She put one of the capsules in a small plastic bag she had brought hidden in her pocket. This collection, photos, times noted in the blue notebook, names of medications, Miguel's testimony about strange purchases, transformed vague suspicion into coherent evidence, something that could no longer be ignored. But just as she was trying to leave the room, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Paul had returned earlier than expected. Anna's blood ran cold. She tried to reach the door, but the nurse was already entering, and his expression shifted from surprise to fury in a second. "What are you doing in here?" His voice was low, controlled, more dangerous than if he had been shouting. Anna backed away, trying to think fast, but the words escaped her. Paul advanced, blocking the exit. There was a quick, violent scuffle. He tried to snatch the phone from her hand. She dodged and slipped on the polished marble floor, hitting her shoulder hard against the corner of the sink. The pain exploded, sharp and breathtaking. "You have no idea who you're messing with," Paul hissed, leaning over her. "A little cleaning lady from the Bronx playing hero? I'm calling security right now and accusing you of theft. I'll say I caught you going through Mr. Roth's things. Who do you think they'll believe, me, a licensed nurse, or you?" Anna felt tears of pain and humiliation burn her eyes, but something else burned alongside them. Anger. Anger from years of being treated as invisible, as less than, as someone whose word meant nothing. "Go ahead and call," she said, her voice hoarse but firm. "But I have proof. I have photos, I have notes, I have witnesses." Paul hesitated for a second, surprise crossing his face. In that instant, Anna struggled to her feet, holding her aching shoulder, and stumbled out of the room. She hurried down the service stairs as fast as she could, hearing his footsteps behind her, but he wasn't trying to catch her. Maybe he was calculating, thinking, worried someone would hear the noise. Anna slipped out the back door, crossed the dark garden, went through the side gate and only stopped running when she reached the illuminated avenue. Breathless, her shoulder throbbing, but with the phone clutched in her hand and the small bag with the capsule safe inside her purse. Even though she had the proof, every step had come at a high cost. That same night, she called Mary from a payphone on the corner, her voice trembling, and asked for a desperate favor: to prepare a simple soup for Mr. Roth the next morning without letting Paul get near it, and to throw away anything he tried to add. Mary, terrified, promised to try. It meant risking her own job. It meant confronting the nurse, but she agreed because she also loved that old man, because she also saw that something was terribly wrong. The subplots began to converge like tributaries of the same river. Rose, from the gatehouse, had seen the family lawyer enter the mansion at a strange hour days before, almost midnight, and mentioned it in a voice message to Anna. Miguel, upon receiving the photos of the bottles via WhatsApp, immediately recognized the irregularities and promised to talk to his uncle, a doctor at a public hospital in the city. The forces were aligning to pull the truth from the shadows of that mansion and cast it into the harsh, raw light of day. Anna spent that night awake, sitting in the small kitchen of the home she shared with her grandmother and brother, with an ice pack on her bruised shoulder and the blue notebook open in front of her. She reread every note, organized the photos on her phone, and wrote a summary in her neat handwriting of everything she had seen, heard, and discovered. She knew the next step would be the hardest, getting someone in a position of authority to believe her. Before trying to sleep, she knelt by her bed with the rosary in her fingers, her shoulder aching with every movement, and prayed for protection for Mr. Roth, courage for herself, and justice for all. She didn't know how it would all end, but she knew she had done the only thing she could. She had chosen not to stay silent. And that choice, no matter the cost, brought a strange peace, a certainty that she was on the right path, even if that path was steep and dangerous. Dawn arrived with a pale light filtering through Anna's bedroom window, illuminating the blue notebook still open on the table. She had only slept for 2 hours, waking up several times with her shoulder throbbing and her heart racing. At 6 in the morning, she received a call from Mary, her voice low and rushed. "Anna, Mr. Roth took a bad turn. Really bad this time. The ambulance is on its way." Her stomach dropped. She grabbed her purse, shoved the notebook and her phone inside, and ran out to catch the first bus. She arrived at the Greenwich mansion just as the ambulance was pulling up, red lights flashing, paramedics carrying a stretcher up the stairs. Julian had rushed back from Chicago, his face tense, his suit wrinkled. Camilla hadn't arrived from the Hamptons yet. Anna approached hesitantly and heard Julian telling the paramedics he wanted to take his father to a private clinic on the Upper East Side. But Mary, with a courage Anna had never seen in her, interrupted with a firm voice. "Mr. Roth, with all due respect, I think it's better to take him to Bellevue. They have a full trauma center. They can run all the tests, and it's a public hospital, there's oversight." Julian looked at her with irritation, but the paramedics were already placing his father on the stretcher, and the old man was too weak to even speak. The developer relented, more to avoid a scene in front of the neighbors than out of agreement. Anna, gathering all the courage she had, offered to go with them. "I know his routine perfectly, his mealtimes, his medications. I can help the doctors." Julian hesitated, then nodded, distracted by his constantly ringing phone. Anna climbed into the ambulance, clutching her purse to her chest, her heart pounding. The ride to the hospital was fast, the siren cutting through the morning. Traffic. Inside the ambulance, Anna held Mr. Roth's hand, feeling his cold, trembling fingers squeeze hers with surprising strength. The old man opened his eyes for a moment and recognized her. "Dear," he whispered. "Stay quiet, Mr. Roth. It's going to be okay. God is watching over you." In the Bellevue emergency room, the scene was chaotic even at that hour. Gurneys lined the hallways, families waited, the strong smell of disinfectant mixed with stale coffee. Mr. Roth was taken directly to an emergency bay. Anna stayed outside, sitting on a hard plastic bench, clutching her purse, praying softly. That's when Miguel appeared, out of breath, still in his pharmacy uniform. He had called his uncle, Dr. Shapiro, a clinical physician who had worked there for 20 years. The doctor, a man in his 50s with greying hair and thin-rimmed glasses, came to speak with Anna half an hour later. "Are you the woman who was caring for Mr. Roth?" "Yes, doctor. I'm the housekeeper. Miguel showed me the photos you sent. May I see your notes?" Anna took the blue notebook from her purse with trembling hands and gave it to him. Dr. Shapiro flipped through the pages, in silence, his eyes scanning the neat handwriting, the times, the medication names, the observations about vomiting, smells, behaviors. When he finished, he looked at her with a serious expression. "This is very detailed, you're observant. I just paid attention. I thought something was wrong. And you were right. I'm ordering a full toxicology screen. Based on your notes and these photos, there are clear indications of medication misuse." The doctor's words were technical, but Anna understood everyone. She felt relief and fear at the same time. Relief because someone was finally taking her seriously. Fear of what would come next. The tests took hours. Anna stayed at the hospital, sitting on that uncomfortable bench, watching the sun rise completely and the ER grow even busier. Julian arrived around 10, accompanied by 2 lawyers in dark suits carrying leather briefcases. Camilla appeared shortly after, dressed all in white, wearing enormous sunglasses, her expensive perfume arriving before she did. When Dr. Shapiro came out with the preliminary results, he called them all into a small, cramped room that smelled of old paper and coffee. He placed the reports on the table. The toxicology screen indicates the presence of sedatives at a concentration far above the therapeutic level. There is also evidence of prolonged use of medications not listed in the patient's official medical record. These substances, in combination and at these doses, are sufficient to cause severe nausea, vomiting, extreme weakness, and even vital organ damage in a person of Mr. Roth's age. Julian turned pale. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your father was being medicated improperly and potentially criminally." "That's absurd," Camilla burst out, her voice shrill. "Who's making these accusations? The maid. This is ridiculous." But Dr. Shapiro was unfazed. He pointed to the blue notebook on the table. Her notes match the lab results. The times, the symptoms, the medications. It all lines up. Furthermore, he held up printed copies of the photos. These bottles are labeled with the patient's name, but the contents don't match the label. That's fraud. Julian, who had been in shock, reacted in the most predictable way. He didn't accept it immediately. He began to defend himself, his voice controlled but harsh. "There must be a mistake. My father had a private nurse, supervised treatment. It makes no sense. The prescriptions," Dr. Shapiro continued, relentless, "were issued in the names of other family members. We have copies provided by the pharmacy where they were filled. The purchasing pattern is irregular and suspicious." Camilla tried to leave the room, but one of the lawyers held her by the arm, whispering something in her ear. Julian sank into his chair, running a hand over his face. His moral boundary was being tested to its limit. He cared about his image, about legality, about his business. The idea that something illegal, something cruel, was happening under his own roof was unbearable. "I want all the reports," he said, his voice low. "I want to know exactly what happened and who is responsible." Dr. Shapiro nodded. "We've already contacted the hospital's social services and notified the authorities. There will be a formal investigation." The social fallout began right there, in that cramped little room. Nurses passing in the hallway whispered, looking through the glass window. Back in the Bronx, Anna's neighbors already knew she was involved in something big at work. Some were proud, others afraid. "Messing with rich people brings trouble," the women gossiped at the local market. In the following days, Anna had to do the hardest thing of her life, give a statement. She was called in by the police, then by a young assistant district attorney with her hair in a tight bun, who listened to her attentively while flipping through the blue notebook as if it were a museum piece. Sitting in that cold room, with a recorder on and 2 witnesses present, revived the old trauma. The memory of the ignored complaint about her mother came flooding back, and for a moment Anna felt she would freeze, that she would forget everything, that they would laugh at her again. But she took a deep breath, touched the rosary hidden in her pocket, and made a conscious decision to overcome her fear. She spoke clearly. She described times with precision. She recalled smells, repeated phrases she had heard from Paul and Camilla, explained every page of the notebook. Every word was a struggle, but also a release, as if she were lifting an enormous weight from her shoulders. "Are you certain about everything you're saying?" the ADA asked in a neutral tone. "Yes, ma'am, I saw it. I wrote it down, and I'm not going to be silent this time." The investigation moved slowly, as it often does. Rose gave the police her logbook of entries and exits at the community, including the strange late-night visit from the family lawyer. Miguel provided the purchase records for the medications, documents the pharmacy had kept for months. Mary, crying but firm, confessed that she had always felt something was very wrong, but she needed the job and was afraid to speak up. Each small piece reinforced the main story, without loose ends, without exaggeration. Paul was called in for questioning and tried to defend himself with technical arguments, but the evidence was too solid. Camilla hired expensive lawyers, but the prescriptions were, in her name, documented, impossible to deny. That afternoon, after giving her statement, Anna went into the small hospital chapel. She sat on a hard wooden pew at the back, folded her hands over her rosary, and remained in silence. She didn't ask for miracles. She didn't make promises. She just took a deep breath and gave thanks, tears streaming quietly down her face for having been heard. Finally, after so many years, someone had believed her. And that feeling of being seen, of being taken seriously, was worth all the fear she had endured. 6 months passed. Enough time for the consequences to settle into everyone's lives like heavy furniture that can no longer be moved. Mr. Roth, thinner but with some color returning to his face, no longer lived in the Greenwich mansion. He now lived in a 2-bedroom ground-floor apartment in a walk-up building in Forest Hills, Queens, close to everything, but far from the suffocating luxury of before. It was a place with natural light streaming through the windows, clean if cold tile floors, and simple fabric curtains that Anna herself had picked out at a local store. It had a small balcony where Mr. Roth liked to sit in the morning and drink his coffee, watching the trees on the street and listening to the everyday sounds of the city. Buses passing, children heading to school, a food cart vendor calling out his wares. A nurse visited 3 times a week, closely supervised by Dr. Shapiro's team. Julian showed up on Sundays punctually, quieter than before, as if the weight of guilt and shame had crushed something inside him. During his first few visits, he could barely look his father in the eye. Over time, he learned to sit in the chair next to the armchair where the old man rested and just listen, without rushing, without his phone ringing every minute, without the obsession for the business empire that had nearly killed the man who gave him life. Camilla was facing a long and bureaucratic legal process for prescription fraud and attempted murder, along with Paul, the nurse. There were no spectacular arrests or sensational headlines. There were long hearings in grey courthouses, endless paperwork, expensive lawyers arguing technicalities, repeated depositions. Justice moved slowly, as it tends to do, respecting deadlines, appeals, motions, but it was moving, and this time, the same rules that once seemed to protect only the powerful were being applied against them. Julian, his carefully guarded reputation shattered, had to face uncomfortable headlines in the business section. Developer faces family scandal involving elderly father. He restructured his company, stepped back from some ventures and made a dry, controlled public statement acknowledging that his father had been the victim of misguided and criminal decisions made by those around him. He didn't cry in public. He didn't fall apart. But anyone who looked closely could see that something inside him had broken. The illusion of control, the certainty that money could solve everything. Anna Miller, for the first time in many years, felt she belonged somewhere that didn't look down on her. She was officially hired as Mr. Roth's companion, a W-2 employee with a fair salary, paid time off, and all the benefits she had never had in years of informal work. Her job was simple and full of dignity: help with the apartment, accompany the old man to his medical appointments, read the newspaper to him in the afternoons, and prepare his meals, strictly following the nutritionist's guidelines. Her salary for the first time in her life was enough for more than just survival. It was enough to breathe. Anna managed to pay off the back rent on her family's apartment in the Bronx, buy a new stove to replace the old one that kept burning the food, and pay for a night class for a certified nursing assistant program that would start in March. That decision, to study, to have a formal profession, to learn the technical language of healthcare, was born from the certainty that she never again wanted to be without the words to defend a patient, without the knowledge to identify when something was wrong. Small elements from the beginning of the story returned with new meaning, like objects that change function over time. The blue notebook, once hidden at the bottom of her purse for fear of being discovered, now rested open on the coffee table in Mr. Roth's apartment, transformed into a log of medications and small daily gratitudes. Anna noted the medicine times, but also phrases the old man said, jokes he told, memories of his youth that he was recovering as his health improved. The trash bags were no longer carried with that tight anxiety in her chest. Now they were just part of the routine of an orderly house, a home where no one hid anything from anyone. The rosary in her pocket was still there, worn from use, its plastic beads faded, but Anna no longer clutched it with desperation. It was a gentle, almost affectionate reminder that her faith had been rewarded not with a spectacular miracle, but with the most precious thing there is, slow but real justice. The relationships had been woven calmly, without hurry, like someone embroidering a dish towel stitch by stitch. Mr. Roth, on Thursday afternoons when he felt stronger, would tell stories of his youth, how he met his wife at a Mardi Gras ball, how he started working at 14 in a carpenter's shop, how he had watched New York City grow and transform over decades. Anna would respond with stories from the Bronx, from when her mother was still alive, of her younger brother who was now studying to be an IT technician, of her grandmother who made cornbread every Sunday. Miguel, the pharmacy delivery guy, would stop by to visit after work a few times a month, always bringing something: a crossword puzzle book for Mr. Roth, a bag of still warm cheese, bread, news from the neighborhood. Rose, now retired from her job at the Greenwich community, would come by some Sundays with a chocolate cake, sit on the balcony with them, and the three would chat about small things, about the weather, about the news on TV. There were no grand declarations of love or friendship, no theatrical hugs or tearful reconciliations. There were everyday gestures, simple, honest. A shared cup of tea in the middle of the afternoon, a crocheted blanket Anna would place over Mr. Roth's legs when the evening grew cool, a laugh that sprang guiltlessly from a silly joke the old man told for the third time. One Friday afternoon, 6 months after everything began to change, Anna was in the kitchen making vegetable soup when she heard Mr. Roth's voice calling from the living room. She went to him, wiping her hands on her apron. "What is it, Mr. Roth?" He was sitting in the armchair by the window, looking out at the street with that peaceful expression of someone who can finally rest. He turned to her with a smile. "Nothing, dear. I just wanted to thank you." Again. Anna felt her chest swell in, a good way. "You don't have to thank me all the time, you know. I just did what was right." But it wasn't easy. I know it wasn't. She sat on the stool next to his armchair, took a deep breath, and for the first time spoke about what it had truly cost her. "I was so scared, Mr. Roth, scared of not being heard. Again. But you were, and you saved my life. God saved you. I just paid attention." Mr. Roth held her hand with a strength that was surprising for someone so frail. God works through people, like you, dear. People who don't give up. People who see what others pretend not to. They sat there in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the city outside, horns, voices, the distant whistle of a commuter train. As the sun began to set behind the buildings, painting the sky orange and pink, Anna stood up, adjusted the blanket on the old man's shoulders, and went to close the window. She looked at Mr. Roth, who was already dozing with a peaceful face, almost smiling, and thought about everything that had happened, everything it had cost, everything it had been worth. Without drama, without grand gestures, just with a quiet certainty in her heart, she whispered to herself, so softly that not even the old man could hear, but loud enough for God to listen. The truth takes its time, but when it arrives, it always comes hand in hand with God. And that simple, sincere, true thought lingered in the warm air of the living room, like a small but steady light, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be seen, that simply exists and illuminates just enough for those who need to find their way back home. Outside, the city continued its infinite noise, but inside that small, vibrant apartment, peace finally reigned.